Hi everyone. This is a video for my long-suffering YouTube watchers and unusually for my very own little community, from global to local, which for those of you who don't know is actually an Agenda 2030 insider joke. No more insider jokes, so I'll explain it later. I realize that if you have to explain a joke, it's not funny, and I have no doubt that it won't be funny by the time I share it with you, but I will explain it anyway. Here we go. Right. Can you see that? I hope you can. This, everybody, is my little village, Cove and Kilcreggans, local place plan. So here, what you can see is the sort of the website where information about the local place plan is being shared. So the reason that I'm looking at it, if you know me well and you know the content of my YouTube channel, you'll understand that I've been deeply concerned about all issues relating to Agenda 2030 for some years. If you are a local person and you haven't heard of Agenda 2030 before, or maybe you've heard of it before, but not really in this context, then thank you for giving me a little bit of your time, and I'll try and explain to you why I think that it's important for people who are feeling that their views are not represented by the local place plan to understand the derivation of the local place plan and where this thrust is coming from. So this is a local place plan for Kilcreggan, and you would have thought that because it is a community, um, it's the community council who are dealing with, agreeing and forwarding this project, that it would be a grassroots initiative, that the local people have decided that they really want to do something and this is what they're offering up. But I just want to show you that the local place fan for Kilcreggan is just going through here, right? This is the local place plan for Oban. Okay, it's exactly the same basis upon which the Oban community is working towards their local place plan. I haven't said that very well, but you know what I mean. And here is the Kilmarnock one. For those of you who are not Scottish, that was just to illustrate that this local place plan, which you'd think was a grassroots initiative in Kilcreggan, this tiny village in rural Scotland, is in fact something which is proliferated all around Scotland and indeed England. In the cities, rather than referring to them, this is Perth and Kinross's local place plan, that's another place in Scotland. But in the cities, rather than referring to the way that people's lives are going to be organized as local place plans, it's livable neighborhoods. You might have heard chat about 20-minute neighborhoods, livable neighborhoods, 15-minute cities, low traffic neighborhoods. There's lots of different names for them, but they are the same thing. In Oxford, in fact, they were calling theirs a 15-minute city, and they withdrew that moniker from all of their documentation because it was meeting with such resistance. But they didn't change what they were doing. They just took that away and they replaced it with actually the Scottish phrase, which is livable neighbourhoods. So go Scotland. And this is the one, for Oxford, just to show you. And this is the one for Bath and Northeast Somerset. So I just wanted to show you, this is not a grassroots initiative that you are pushing back against. This is a global initiative which seeks to provide funding for development which fits the criteria of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which have been decided on by the United Nations, which is an unelected body of bureaucrats, essentially, who don't really have the right to decide how Kilcreggan organise their village, or indeed Bath or Oxford or anywhere. You'll have heard of Agenda 21, at least in passing. It's also referred to as Agenda 2030, and it's also referred to as the New World Order. It's easy to dismiss those references because they have come up in the last 5 years in all sorts of different contexts and in contexts that people would rather not sort of discuss, contentious subjects, and so, but at the end of the day, I want you to see Agenda 2021 2030. It's real. This is a United Nations document in which they outline their objectives. The United Nations document goes on, and ultimately what is derived from it is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are things like end poverty, which on the surface sounds absolutely wonderful, but you do have to remember that in if you're not going, if the multi-billionaires are not going to redistribute their wealth in order to end poverty, which they're not going to, it's the middle class who will need to redistribute their wealth in order that we end poverty. Um, and that's not necessarily something that the middle class would object to in its entirety. I think they're very generous as a group of people anyway, but they might object to the notion that, we're all going to be equally poorer. Or some people are going to be a little bit better off, but a lot of us are going to be poorer. Um, and they might not understand that when it says end poverty, that's the vision. That's where the extra money for the people in Africa is going to come from, or in India, or in places in the world where they don't have very much, is going to come from the Western middle classes, and the Western middle classes are going to be leveled. Another one would be end hunger. And I bring that one up because I want you to see that, if you end poverty and you have failed to end hunger, then you just have failed. So I want you to see that what they are simple, little simplistic phrases, and they're too simplistic. The world is much more complicated than that, and you can't end, if you haven't ended hunger when you've ended poverty, then you've done something wrong. The reason that they have these little simplistic aims is that it allows people to apply for funding that suits those aims. So if your project in some way goes towards ending hunger, you apply for, I think it's SDG 3, but don't quote me, okay? And if you end poverty, it's SDG 1 that you apply. So it might be that your project hits both streams, in which case you apply to both. What happens though is that because you in your heartfelt way, genuinely, and your community want the funding, because you can see that there's a pot there, and you've crafted your project so that it is exactly as it should be, because it's exactly as the community feels it is appropriate for the needs of the community to tick some sort of box, and it will do it perfectly. But you trim it and you change it, and you make it fit the requirements of the funding stream so that you can get the funding, because something is better than nothing, or at least that's what you think. And so you take the funding and you make the project the way that actually ultimately the UN decided that you should have it. And then, these projects, if you concede, as I've just shown you, that the funding for all of these things is relatively similar sourcing, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, these large global unelected platforms. Uh, you, if Oxford and Glasgow and London and Kilmarnock and Perth and Kinross and everywhere, we're applying to the same sort of funding streams, and they're trimming our visions in the same way. Ultimately, you're going to end up with homogenous neighborhoods that look more or less the same and that have more or less the same facilities. Now, this is not only going on in the UK, it is a global phenomenon. Over here, we've got, Houston becoming a 15-minute city. We've got, this is Melbourne, 15-minute city. I've just picked some random places to show you. This is a global initiative. This is nothing to do with Kilcreggan. This is coming down from above, and even if people don't really understand or believe that there is a larger sort of plan to dictate your lives, you must be able to see that this is not grassroots up, because it's just not feasible that everybody in Oxford would suddenly, all at the same time as everybody in Melbourne, as everybody in Montana, as everybody in Kilcreggan, decide that they all want, the same things at the same time, and they're all going to call them by the same names. Even we're going to have 20-minute neighborhoods or low traffic neighborhoods or livable neighborhoods, but it's all roughly the same, and the content is the same. That's not you know what you will get is a homogenous world, is the point that I'm making. You will get, we travel because we want to see different things and experience different cultures, and even the length and breadth of your own country, you travel for the variety, and that will disappear if everybody is working towards exactly the same strategy. Um, so this symbol here, actually, just so that you become familiar with it. Oh, maybe I don't have it. It's on my marker up here, which is far too tiny for you to see, but it's this round circle, and it's colourful, and it goes round, and you'll see it in lots and lots of places, and that is the Sustainable Development logo. No point in talking to you about it because you probably can't see what I'm talking about. Anyway, right. The idea behind all of this is a great reset. And again, you've probably heard that phrase and possibly dismissed it, but in fact, it's not conspiracy speak. There is a plan to try and reset the world so that it is a fairer, more equitable place. Now, there is a difference between equality and equity. Equality is about equality of opportunity, and equity is about equality of outcome. And there is a sacrifice made in equality of outcome that is not made in equality of opportunity. Anyway, so going back to our me trying to explain to you what is going on from my perspective, and you may think that I'm wrong, and that's okay. Everybody's got to get out there and talk at the moment because this is happening more or less whether we like it or not. The only way we could stop it would be if we talked. So here we go. Now, this is the team who are behind the community project, the local place plan, and the local place plan has gotten its funding from this community enterprise in Scotland group. Now, I've had a look to sort of trace and try and understand the funding, but first, I just want to point out to you here that it says we have an inspiring, the grant also supports the recipients by providing them with a mentor. I just want you to have that in your head for a moment, because I want to talk to you about something called the Delphi technique. The Delphi technique is a way in which predetermined outcomes are arrived at by groups of the public who, at the end of it, perceive that they have had their say, and it perhaps has not gone with them, but they have had their say, that the public's been consulted. But actually the outcome was already determined. Now, so for instance, I want to use net zero as a way of sort of explaining that. So in Scotland, we are committed to reaching net zero by 2035, which is actually 2045, sorry, here, which is actually 5 years earlier than they are down in England, and 5 years earlier than the Paris Accord requires anybody to meet these, in my mind, ridiculous targets. But even if you think that they are legitimate targets and it's worthwhile, we are trying to, in Scotland, or we're committed in Scotland to reaching them 5 years earlier than everybody else. Now, if you haven't come across this document, it's called Absolute Zero, and it was funded by the government. They asked Cambridge University and a couple of other universities here, Oxford, Nottingham, Bath, Imperial College London, to get together and work out how it would be possible that the UK could get to net zero by 2050. The document has actually been pulled because so many people, if you click on the link, it no longer works to download the report. I assume that's because so many people have used it as proof that this is a really terrible idea. Anyway, they still have this up, so I don't know if you can read all of that, but basically, this is what would have to happen for people to get, to net zero by 2050. These stop signs are, no shipping, so literally no uh, redistribution of merchandise around the world by means of shipping. So no flat pack from Sweden, let alone China. And then no flying. And that means internally and externally, because aviation fuel won't be such that it's possible for us to fly without creating emissions. I suspect that, the Davos crowd will still fly in on their private jets to tell us how to, make less carbon ourselves. You heard that one, we are the carbon that they hope to reduce, or you are the carbon that they hope to reduce. So there'll be no flying, but also it'll be all electric vehicles, and that will be minimal in the sense that, it will be electric vehicles that are ideally, if they have their way, automated, not requiring of the driver, and that they will be driven, there'll be shared things. So like a community will have a couple, and that those couple will run about as people presumably book them, like Uber, which is really great for like old people who are, struggling to get into a car, or women with children and prams and stuff like that, because, the human touch, the help is, just right there where you need it, when you need it. So when you're looking at local place plans and you're in a community like Kilcreggan, and you're sort of really staunchly standing in favor of car parking spaces, because in fact in Kilcreggan village, one of the primary concerns and things that we need is car parking spaces for residents, for people who want to use the facilities, because we have more houses being built in the area, and because we want to attract tourism businesses to our people, to our local businesses. So for all those reasons, we need a few more car parking spaces. And people have been talking about it forever, quite rightly, and getting nowhere with it, because the big plan for the world is not really to need cars. So it's not going to be the focus of a local place plan. The local place plans are going to encourage active travel, cycling. This active travel phrase, it's like, there's all sorts of wee phrases that are all hooked in to Agenda 2030. Once you become familiar with it, you hear them everywhere and you recognize them. But active travel is all about, this 15-minute radius business, so that, everybody can walk back and forth to everything, or within a short amount of time. So they should, because that will create less carbon. So they should scoot, and they should cycle, and they should walk, and it's better for them anyway, because they're getting the exercise. And the community is the most important thing, and sort of therefore they'll be basically shamed. People will be shamed into, being active in their travel. And what remains will be electric cars. Anyway, Absolute Zero document. I actually did a video on it when the document was still up, so you can find that on my YouTube channel if you want to know more about it. Anyway, so Scotland is committed to reaching net zero, those targets that I just showed you, 5 years earlier than everybody else. So as I said, be aware when you're trying to strategize a way forward to talk about, your objections to the local place plan, that's the direction that they're traveling in. And as I said, this Delphi technique is the business of knowing that net zero is where you're going, and when you send out questionnaires, or when you organize meetings, they're all organized on the premise that that is already an agreement between people, for instance. So you craft the survey so that people don't get to have an opinion on whether or not we should be attempting as a village to get to net zero by 2045. whether that should be one of our priorities. And the surveys are on other subjects. It's the same thing is done rather than being able to voice your views or writing your views. What you get is, five bullet point questions, and you circle the one that most represents what you think, and you look at something or 2 points and it just says, do you prefer it to be done this way or this way, and you think, well, neither way. So you don't answer the survey, and then they say, oh well, we put out a survey and some people answered it, and the majority of the people who answered it said this, so this is the way we're going to do it. So that's the Delphi technique. And if you want to read a little bit about it, there are documents online where you can find out more about the Delphi technique. And I'm going to take you back to the place plan itself, because I want to show you something. Maybe I put it up here. Where did I put them? Right here. So that's number one, and then I think this is number two. Right, okay. This is Kilcreggan village. And when you look at the place plan here, there is private property and private businesses which have just been eliminated from the place plan. Not only are they not there, they don't feature where they actually exist. The people who own them and run them weren't consulted before this vision for the future was put up in the post office and so on and so forth. And so, quite rightly so, you would imagine that they would be quite upset about being treated that way. And also, it's, what rights do other people have to decide what happens with other people's private property? And remember how I was saying about shaming becoming part of the culture? Well, there's what we're being pushed towards is something called communitarianism, and really, it's just a rebrand. It's a rebrand of communism. That slogan you've heard everywhere: "You'll own nothing and be happy." They weren't joking. I mean, they might have been joking about the "be happy" bit, but the own nothing, they weren't. And what would happen is a community, through the people who organize the local place plan, put up a vision for something, as I just showed you there, that disregards somebody's private property rights. And then the person who owns the private property, presumably, I can only imagine that what the local place plan people are planning to do is buy it from them. And, if they don't want to sell, then they will be kind of shamed into selling, because the communitarianism is the philosophy that the community comes first, and it emphasizes the overriding needs of the community. And once you start to get people to think that way all the time, then there'll be a lot of shunning going on for people who want to drive cars or people who don't want to sell their property, so that the community can benefit from whatever, I don't know, space, well, thing that they want to put on that space. I wish it could have been funnier there, but I couldn't think of anything. So communitarianism is the opposite of thinking, I have to learn how to take care of myself. Once I've learned how to take care of myself, perhaps I will be able to be in a couple and we can take care of each other. Once you get to the point where you can take care of each other and look after yourself, maybe you can have a child and look after them. And then, if you have managed to look after yourself, your spouse, your child, your job, and your home, then perhaps you can give whatever you have left over to your community. That is another philosophy for people to consider. It's probably a very badly explained version of individualism, but individualism is a kind of unfair word because it makes it sound like only caring about yourself. It doesn't get to the point of, realizing that without the individual, there is no community. So, it's important for the individual to be important. Anyway, right. So that's I think everything that I wanted to show you. So I'm going to take myself off of screen share, and I'm going to come back, and I'm just going to end it by saying this is if you don't agree with local place plans and where they come from and where they're trying to head, then you really need to mobilize now. There's not a lot of time left because this is such it's been a plan. It's been, it's decades in the making by the people who put it together. And they finally got it to the point where it's almost tipping point. They're almost there. If you don't want to live under the rules of communitarianism, and you don't want to give up your private vehicles, and you don't want to try and achieve net zero for the village as a priority above and beyond, making sure that we can have ferries that dock. We have a problem in Kilcreggan. The newer ferries are unable to dock at our old pier, but our old pier is beautiful. It's a historical wonder. And so there's discussions that need to be had in order to work out how on earth to preserve the pier and also preserve the tourism, which we also desperately need. So, and that's important, and people need to find a solution to, and they need to be talking about that and not this really. But this is presenting itself and trying to push itself through. So you do have to know at least where it's all coming from, and get together and talk to people about it. And also, I should think that there's probably value, merit at this stage in the game of finding other communities who are having the same issues and trying to push back against this in their local area, so that there begins to be some sort of solidarity of network and understanding around the country and then around the world. Now, that's all my opinion. Okay, obviously based on what I've shown you. Please don't hate me. I don't hate you. Just because you've been involved in the local place plan doesn't mean anything. It means that you care about the environment and you wanted to do the right thing. If you've been involved in some of the groups going towards it, I don't think anything badly of you. I understand that you're just getting involved because you really want to take care of your community, and you're good, kind-hearted people who give of themselves and want to make our community a better place. But um, I really would beg of everybody just to take a step back for a minute and think about the bigger picture, and whether actually you support the bigger picture in your heart, whether you believe that the bigger picture is where we should be heading. And even if you do think it's where we should be heading, whether you're okay with us heading there without everybody getting to discuss, where we're heading and whether it suits them and whether they think it's a good idea. Um, but okay, so that's me. I'm going to go now. I really, really appreciate your time, and I hope I've contributed something useful to the conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.